President Obama is back from his three-day trip to Mexico and Costa Rica, where he, as promised, took every opportunity to boast about the economic success of the U.S.-Mexico relationship and how he believes that relationship will help to create U.S. jobs. On Saturday, he said, quote, "One of the best ways to grow our economy is to sell more goods and services made in America to the rest of the world. That includes our neighbors to the south," end quote. Back with us via Skype to evaluate the president's trip is Jason Marczack. He was here last week to help us preview the tour, and he is the policy director for the America Society and the Council of the Americas. Welcome back to the show, Jason. Do appreciate it.
Good morning, Debbie. How are you doing?
Doing just fine. My favorite question on this topic to ask is, there was no policy change, there were no trade agreements, there were no joint ventures announced. What was accomplished with this trip?
Well, the purpose of the trip was to show that there is a new Mexico, to show that since President Peña Nieto came into office in December, he's already pushed through education reform, telecommunication reform. Mexico is growing at double the rate the United States is growing, about 3.5% projected for this year. And Mexico is on the rise. And the point of the trip was to show that Mexico, oftentimes a forgotten important trading partner and both economic partner and political partner, is increasingly going to be important for our global competitiveness. And that was the point of his trip. The point was not to focus on the security situation, but to focus on economic growth and economic opportunities with Mexico and Central America. In his trip to Costa Rica, the point was to both look at the increased opportunities with regard to 4 years after 5 years after passage of the DR-CAFTA trade agreement, to look at how to better further tap into economic opportunities in Central America, as well as how the U.S. can be an increasingly a more important partner in helping Central America to combat security and violence.
Jason, while the president was in Mexico, he said, without the strong support of Hispanics, including so many Mexican Americans, I would not be standing before you today as president of the United States. So I'm wondering, was part of the reason for the president to visit Mexico and this region also a public nod to the U.S. Hispanic population of voters who helped put Obama back into office?
I think you're definitely right there. I think that the Hispanics, the Latino vote helped the president to win not only the vote nationally, but in particular swing states like Nevada and others. And without that, the Latino vote, President Obama might not have won a second term. And so I think it was, one, a nod to the importance of the Latino electorate, and two, even though immigration was not one of the topics to be discussed, at least publicly, between President Peña Nieto and President Obama, with regard to immigration reform, is to show, part of the point of the trip was to show that Mexico has changed dramatically, and the Mexico that sent 5-6 million undocumented immigrants in the last 10, 20 years is a different Mexico now. It is a Mexico now where there's increased opportunities for young Mexicans, where even with the potential passive immigration reform, we won't see that surge in undocumented Mexicans crossing the border again.
Jason, the president talked about a deepening commitment to democracy by Mexico and, of course, their president, Enrique Peña Nieto. And you're talking about this dramatic change. Of course, the president there said he would overhaul laws there to increase and foster economic growth. Also, investments in manufacturing and technology has helped the middle class. But the main problem is here, the elephant in the room, is that they are still struggling with poverty. 3 out of 5 Mexicans are struggling at the poverty line. What is being done about that?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That when we talk about the growth in Mexico, when we talk about the bright future of Mexico and the increased trade and opportunities, is that a lot of that growth hasn't necessarily funneled down to some of the most needy Mexicans. And that is definitely a concern for Mexico to be able to move ahead. I think that Mexico's increasingly a destination for more manufacturing jobs that are actually coming from China to Mexico to be able to tap into the North American market. Those types of more middle income or lower middle income jobs are important for helping to bring the Mexican poor out of poverty. I think one thing Mexico has also done very well in regard to healthcare is being able to. There's a program called Seguro Popular that was passed and actually implemented under President Fox originally, And that's a program to basically give health insurance to Mexicans who lack insurance. And so healthcare costs in Mexico, as in the United States, can also be a prime factor in driving people into poverty. So I think that by giving Mexicans that opportunity for free state subsidized healthcare is something that can prevent folks from falling back into poverty. But it is definitely the next step in Mexico's economic progress.
Jason, when you were on the show last week and we were previewing the trip, one of the issues that you brought up was the crime, for instance, in Honduras, which has the highest homicide rate in the world, I believe. And when asked about this during the trip, President Obama, talked about the familiarity with violence and crime and he compared it even to his hometown, Chicago. I won't read the whole quote, but suffice it to say, he basically said, we're no stranger to this type of violence. How do you think that kind of comment played there? How was that received?
Well, I think he's, part of the point of that comment was to identify with the fact that yes, we feel your pain in regard to the violence. Obviously, the violences are on very different scales in a place like Honduras versus a place like Chicago. But one of the things that the president did do in Mexico is he did admit that we are that there was not a junior partner or a senior partner; that were equal partners, and he reinforced his commitment to combating gun violence and to further stemming the flow of illegal guns that cross the U.S. southern border into Mexico. He didn't mention necessarily the illicit cash that flows, but he did say that he's going to make a second attempt at trying to push forward common sense gun reform legislation, which is obviously a big concern for the Mexicans, given the high number of illegal guns that cross into Mexico through the United States.
We spoke with Professor Pinel Joseph earlier in the show, and he talked about perhaps this trip was really about a table setting for some more substantive work that would be done behind the scenes. Do you expect any announcements, anything that might come in the short term as a result of this trip?
Well, the White House did put out a fact sheet after the trip with regard to its visit with President Peña Nieto, and announced the establishment of a high-level economic dialogue, a bilateral forum on higher education and research, more opportunities to work together in regard to border management, both in regard to people crossing, but also insofar as facilitating commerce. I think one of the important points when looking at our relationship with Mexico and also with our Central American partners is the fact that we have a very, very extensive relationship at a cabinet level, and also at a congressional level, and there are a myriad of working groups, and that sometimes Mexico, Central America, and actually Latin America as a whole there might not be necessarily always the presidential attention that's given to the region, but there are many opportunities to work together through working groups. It's actually something that Assistant Secretary of Western Hemisphere Affairs Roberta Jacobson actually mentions in her new article in America's Quarterly, 10 Things You Didn't Know About Our Relationship with the Western Hemisphere. And I think that that's an important point, is that even when the president necessarily focusing his attention on the region, that there are many working groups, there are many cabinet-level dialogues, and I think that that will only increase.
All right. Jason Marczak, thank you so much again for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.